Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into something that is honestly one of the most fascinating and kind of unsettling mysteries of the human experience. We're talking about the architecture of our own memories. Now, most of us trust our minds implicitly, right? I mean, we rely on our memories to tell us who we are, where we've been, the things we've done. But what if I told you that your own mind is, well, occasionally playing tricks on you? Today, we're going to explore exactly why false memories don't just happen, but why they feel so incredibly real to us.
To kick things off, I want you to just search your own childhood memories for a second. Do you remember ever getting lost in a shopping mall as a kid? You know, that sudden panic wandering around past the big department stores, and then that massive wave of relief when you were finally found? Well, back in the 1990s, there was this groundbreaking psychological study where researchers asked participants to recall this exact scenario. They told these individuals, hey, you got lost in a mall as a child, and they even went as far as saying that the participants' parents had confirmed the whole thing.
But here is the wild twist. None of those people had actually ever gotten lost in a mall. None of them. Yet, a staggering 25% of the participants didn't just nod along and agree. They actually generated entirely false memories of the event from scratch. They came up with incredibly vivid, super specific details. One guy even remembered the exact clothing of the stranger who supposedly found him, saying he was rescued by an old man wearing a flannel shirt. I mean, let that number sink in. A quarter of the people built a full-blown memory out of thin air, complete with wardrobe details for characters that literally never existed. So, how on earth does our brain do this?
Section 1. Your brain is an architect, building your reality.
Okay, so to understand why this happens, we really have to look at the neuroscience behind the illusion. We're going to bust some pretty major myths about how our incredibly complex brains actually process our day-to-day experiences. You see, we have to move away from this idea that the brain is just some passive recording device and realize it's actually more like a master architect. Now, most of us walk around believing the myth that memory is like a hard drive or a perfect video recording. We think we can just hit play and watch the past unfold exactly as it happened. But as neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett's research reveals, the reality is vastly different. And this brilliantly illustrates the point. Your brain is actually a real-time prediction and construction engine. It isn't just reacting to the world around you. It's actively building your experience in the blink of an eye, using billions of neurons working together to make sense of the present moment based on what you've experienced in the past.
Because your brain is constantly sifting through past data to predict what's happening right now, our emotions and our experiences are fundamentally just educated guesses built in the moment. And this is the absolute key to what we're talking about today. Because your brain constructs both real memories and fake memories using the exact same predictive guessing process, a fabricated memory inherently feels identical to an actual experience. Your brain is using the exact same building blocks for both. That is exactly why a false memory feels undeniably real from the inside. It's all the same hardware.
Section 2. How false details sneak in and trick the brain. So, if our brains are these incredibly powerful construction engines, how exactly do they end up using the wrong blueprints? Well, let's shift over to the research of psychologist Daniel L. Schachter to investigate the specific psychological bugs that manage to hack our predictive brains. The first major culprit is a little something called suggestibility. This is when we accidentally incorporate information from outside sources, like a passing comment from a friend, a news report, or a leading question, into our own personal recollections, totally without realizing we're doing it. Think back to that mall study. The psychologist successfully planted outside information simply by telling the subjects, hey, your parents confirmed this. The brain took that highly suggestive external data and just seamlessly wove it into a deeply personal, internal recollection.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is our second psychological bug, misattribution. This happens when our brains innocently mix up the context of what is real and what is imagined. Or maybe we forget where a piece of information originally came from. You remember a specific detail, for sure, but you completely misattribute the source. You basically map a memory of an image, or even just a thought, onto a belief that you actually lived it.
To show you just how easily this happens, researchers ran this pretty quirky experiment. Participants were shown a physical image of a magnifying glass. Then, a bit later, they were simply told to just imagine a sweet lollipop in their heads. While later on, when they were tested on what they actually saw, participants frequently recalled that they physically looked at both the magnifying glass and the lollipop. Their brains really struggled to link the objects to the correct context. They literally couldn't separate what their eyes had actually seen from what their minds had simply dreamed up.
And honestly, it gets even wilder. In another study, researchers briefly flashed participants a random collection of photographs. Hidden in that mix were images of a university campus that none of the participants had ever actually visited. Just 3 weeks later, they brought them back and asked about that campus. A majority of the participants claimed that they had probably or even definitely visited that campus in person. Just a super quick glance at a photograph was enough for their brains to misattribute the context and construct an entirely false lived experience.
Section 3. Emotions rewriting the past. Like a mental time machine.
Okay, so we've seen how outside suggestions and misplaced contexts can mess with our memory. But sometimes the call is coming from inside the house. Let's look at how our current emotional state and our current opinions act like a mental time machine, actively and retroactively editing our past. Okay, let's dive into this fascinating data. A psychologist questioned over 2,000 people about their views on the legalization of marijuana back in 1973. Then they went back and asked those exact same people again in 1982. Naturally, some people who supported legalization in 73 had changed their minds by 82 and were now against it. But when researchers asked them to recall what they believed back in 1973, those individuals were much more likely to falsely remember that they were always against it. Their brains essentially rewrote their own history to bring their old views perfectly in line with their current ones.
And this retroactive editing doesn't just happen with our own personal opinions, it happens with historical facts too. In another study, researchers gave 2 groups some background information on a historical war and asked them to rate the likelihood of each side winning. Both groups got the exact same info, but one group was told who actually won in real life. The group that knew the outcome rated the winning side as way more likely to win from the very start. As the researchers pointed out, this makes zero logical sense. I mean, if there's a 20% chance of thunderstorms and a thunderstorm actually happens, the original chance doesn't retroactively jump to 100%, right? Yet our current knowledge tricks our brain into inflating how predictable the past really was.
Section 4. Embracing our subjective reality and the real-world stakes.
So our brains construct memories on the fly, they mix up where information comes from, and they constantly rewrite the past to match the present. It's fascinating for sure, but it also brings us to some very serious real-world stakes. We have to move from just marveling at these brain quirks to actually understanding the profound impacts of our flawed memory systems. When we treat our constructed memories as perfect video recordings, the consequences can be really severe. In police interrogations, if investigators use leading questions, the power of suggestibility can easily result in incorrect identifications or even completely unreliable confessions. With eyewitness testimony, simply misattributing a face seen in a different context can lead to an innocent person being accused. In courtrooms, if a judge tells a jury to completely disregard a piece of inadmissible evidence, their brains often just cannot unknow it, which ends up biasing their verdict. And even in medical settings, if a patient seeks a second opinion and that second doctor already knows the first doctor's diagnosis, that prior knowledge can unconsciously bias their new conclusion. Understanding how our memory actually works isn't just a fun science fact. It's absolutely crucial for a fair and functioning society.
Which brings us to this really powerful thought from Daniel L. Schachter. He notes that the problem isn't necessarily that our memories are fallible. The real problem arises when we demand that our memory be treated as absolute ironclad fact. We have to accept this fundamental truth. Our memories are highly subjective perceptions, beautifully and complexly constructed by our brains in the moment. So, if our past is quite literally being rebuilt by our present state of mind, I want to leave you with this final provocative question. Who is truly responsible for the memories you're going to construct tomorrow? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you think you know.